My name is Norbert Goldfield, and I'm the founder and executive director of Healing Across the Divides. I want to welcome you all to the Healing Across the Divides webinar that's focused on one of our new grantees. Healing Across the Divides is an 18-year-old non-for-profit whose mission is to measurably improve the health of marginalized Israelis and Palestinians through community-based interventions. We do it through working with community-based groups, such as one that you'll hear from today. What I plan to do is speak for 1 or 2 moments, then hand it over to our Israeli representative, Marganit Ophir-Gutler, who will make a few introductory comments and then hand it over to the grantee. We will have ample time for a chat and conversation. So please put your comments and questions in the chat, and we would welcome all ideas and questions. It goes without saying that starting a program about a Palestinian who live in East Jerusalem cannot go forward without mentioning, which for me, I'll say personally, is the most difficult time in my life, which is to say the ongoing war in Ukraine. We've all lived, and I've lived through the Vietnam War, did my part in terms of demonstrations, et cetera, but this is fundamental. So I just want to highlight for everybody that while I, as a human being, very much am focused on what I can do concretely, and what I can concretely do is be the founder and executive director of Healing Across the Divides, which has its mission, which I've already described. I can also say that I am affected, and I doubtless would say that we're all affected by what's going on in the world today. So I want to just keep that as an overarching theme. But going back to Healing Across the Divides, we work, as I already said, with community-based groups. And what our intent is to working through our representative in Israel, our representative in Palestine, Nihan Fatah, who is on the Zoom today, and working with other staff people like Tova Reznicek, who's our director of communications, and our board. We have board members who are on the Zoom today, and one of them will be speaking later on, is what we try to do is improve the capacity and effectiveness of the groups that we work with the dream, and this is my dream, speaking for myself, that may not happen in my lifetime, but that some of the leaders of some of these groups, and you will be meeting at least 2 of the leaders today, and shortly we'll be meeting because we have an annual Healing Across the Divides study tour that will be going on, starting rather, a week from today. Some of these leaders or some of these community groups will be, hopefully, some of tomorrow's political leaders. Because in fact, that's what's needed if we are to engage and resolve in one of the longest standing conflicts in the world today, which is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which in many ways, in fact, unfortunately, is not getting better. It's in fact, in many ways, deteriorating. But the staff of Healing Across the Divides, the community groups that you will hear from are never giving up. And in that spirit, I want to introduce a wonderful representative of Healing Across Divides who I've known for years, Marganit Ophir-Gutler.
Thank you, Norbert, for your introduction. And it's really difficult times. And I think it was, even for me, I thought, talking about women's rights and sexual and reproductive rights in East Jerusalem, while a war is happening in other parts of the world. And of course, everything is in a way connected. And also in my own thoughts, I thought how politics affects women's life. Mostly in war zones and mostly in conflict areas. And although East Jerusalem is under the Israeli municipal law of Jerusalem, and Yasmin and Dina would explain how it works in a short while. Still, we can learn how the many difficulties of the healthcare system in East Jerusalem also affects directly women's health. And I think this is something that we can see and experience around the world. And I truly happy and excited that Ladaat joins our grantees. It's a wonderful organization. I think they're doing a breakthrough work in Israel and in East Jerusalem. And we're willing to talk about their experience and their work and their new project in East Jerusalem. We would start with Yasmin Shaloudi. She is a feminist from East Jerusalem. Thank you really so much for joining us, Yasmin. And she is the first volunteer in the Arabic hotline of Ladaat. She would be followed by Dina Shalev. She is the director of Ladaat. And as Norbert mentioned, you're all welcome to write your comments and questions, and we would address all of them. We have enough time to discuss deeply everything that they would relate to. And of course, if you have any other questions, you are welcome to ask. So Yasmin, thank you. And I'm unmuting myself.
Oops.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so hello guys and girls. Very nice to meet you. My name is Yasmin Shalodi. I live in Jerusalem, in East Jerusalem, and I'm one of the first volunteers in the Arabic hotline in Ladaat. I'm going to be explaining a little bit about the unique situation of women in Jerusalem, in East Jerusalem, what it's like, what it means, and how it affects their choices and their sexual health. So we'll be starting with a little bit of history. Historical background. So we have the 1948 and the 1967 wars. So Jerusalem was divided during the first 20 years of Israel's existence. After the 1948 war, Israel controlled only the western portions of it, while Jordan controlled the east part of Jerusalem. So the green line in the map here showcases the borders set after the war in 1948. After the 1967 war, it's called the 6 Days War, Israel seized all of Jerusalem together with several neighboring West Bank villages, thus annexing East Jerusalem and the Golan Heights in moves not recognized internationally. So in accordance with international law, East Jerusalem is known as the capital of Palestinian state at the time of its emergence. The red line in the map shows the borders of Israel's jurisdiction currently in Jerusalem. Some of these areas are behind the wall, such as you see here Shafat refugee camp and others. So a little bit about citizenship and residency. Israel refused to grant residents of Jerusalem citizenship, but decided to grant them permanent residence. It's a blue ID card, identity card, that's what we call it, and a pass called laissez-passer, a French word. So this certificate is issued to anybody who doesn't have a passport, but who has a travel document which literally means let them pass. So the Arab residents of East Jerusalem hold the status of permanent residents in Israel. The pass is Israeli, but the nationality in the certificate is Jordanian. Israel treats the population of Jerusalem as Jordanians and refuses to consider them as Israeli citizens. So in other words, the state treats them as foreigners whose residency status can be revoked on a regular basis. The residents are forced to defend their residency constantly by proving their location, their certain center of life to the Ministry of Interior and to the Social Security Services. So the discrimination continues with the fact that these residencies can be taken away from Arab residents anytime. So this residency is a consent, like a consent given to by the occupying power to the residents. And there is a possibility that this consent to be revoked by administrative decisions, which happens after every attack in Jerusalem. Citizenship, on the other hand, it's one of the most powerful rights that the state is almost impossible to deny its citizens. And only in rare and few cases, such as treason, the revocation of citizenship requires a legal decision and sometimes even parliamentary intervention. Not to mention the right to apply for membership, such as membership to the Knesset. You'll need to have citizenship. And I've personally had a number of problems at global airports with this travel document. In the airport, for example, the employee asks, "Where are you from?" I say, "Palestine." And then they ask, "Give me your passport." So I give them my passport. And then the employee discovers that this is not a passport, but a travel document issued by the state of Israel. So they open the card and they're surprised that the nationality is Jordanian. This is where you start with the spiral of explaining what this hybrid card is. And it ends up with you waiting for hours and going through other searches until they finally realize the nature of this certificate we're holding. So you're living in a vortex because you're Palestinian who carries an Israeli travel document and a Jordanian nationality with an Israeli certificate. And we're talking about 38% of Jerusalem's population. 95% of them are only residents. And there has been an increase in the number of applicants for Israeli citizenship, actually, due to administrative conditions. 2 years ago, around 1,700 applications were submitted, while in comparison, in 2003, only 70 applications were submitted. So there is an increase and it's a high percentage, but overall it's a very small portion of Jerusalem's population. Also, ones who are Israeli citizens can live anywhere and enjoy full citizenship rights. However, the acquisition of Israeli citizenship has a few conditions. For example, you'll need to be living in Israel. You must know a little Hebrew. You must have a clean security file. And you'll need to wait for at least 2 years to get your turn to apply for citizenship. And you will probably end up needing to hire a lawyer if you want to see any advancement in the process of your application. So moving on from politics to culture. Arab culture. When we say Palestinian Arab community, we're mostly talking about a patriarchal society. The system of this society is mostly controlled by men, with men occupying the most important and influential positions in the society. It is hierarchical. Let's take, for example, the order of the family. The head of the family, who is also the one controlling the economy, is the father or the husband. If the father is absent, then the one responsible for the family is the son, if he is grown up. If not, then other female figures in the family are in charge of it, such as the grandfather, uncles, and others. There's also always a male figure on top. This is the reason why it's hard for many women to leave the house and ask for help if she needs to consult a health consultant, for example. Many need to ask for their male figure's permission to go to a certain place, despite being above 18. Currently, we're witnessing some changes in the situation, but it's very small and it's very slow. The society in Jerusalem is very conservative and very religious. Palestinian Jerusalemite society is mostly Muslims and Christians, with Muslims being the majority. It has it's how do I say this? Jerusalemites are very pressured because they live in a holy city. It is a very unique, they live in a very unique circumstances. Everyone expects great things from them and always has a critical eye on them, on what Palestinians, Jerusalemites do. They are born with huge responsibility on their shoulders. The men should be masculine and extremely macho. They should be proud patriots, behave in a certain way. The women should be feminine, behave, act, dress in a conservative way. So one should always be on guard and think carefully about any small behavior. The society is extremely community oriented. Anything that happens with neighbors, my mom will know about it from other neighbors. Anything that happens with my distant cousin, my brother will know and tell us about it. If my cousin sees me with a guy, my brother will know about it in an hour. Privacy is non-existent. We have many occasions for family reunions where everyone will get updates on everyone. So it makes it very hard on women to do anything without the whole town knowing about it. Imagine a visit to the local Kupat Khulim or the nearest hospital where the neighbor's son works. So there's also the political effects on women's choices. So there's this concept in our society where you should always beware the effects of Israeli culture on the Palestinian society or any Western influence. Everything that is out of norms is shunned and criticized. Take, for example, if a woman wants to be on birth control, she should ask for her husband's permission. She cannot do that without his approval. Many people refuse the idea of being on birth control, claiming that Israel wants to limit the number of Arabs in the city, thus promoting such blasphemous acts to women. Another great example is Kupat Khulim, which is where patients go before they go to the hospital. It's like a clinic. So if you're in East Jerusalem, the health of the population is the responsibility of contractors who manage the clinics, the Kupat Khulim. So this terrible situation leads to a relatively low treatment for patients in East Jerusalem, thus causing a huge gap compared to the treatment that Jews in the west part in the city receive. This situation is also known to the state, but the Ministry of Health still does not cancel the system to transfer the Kupat Khulim to direct management. The Department of Health rejects the transfer and allows this phenomenon of contractors to continue. This also causes many trouble for women in East Jerusalem, since there's basically no privacy in this place that supposedly provides them with treatment and should be it should have secrecy. There's also the cultural and language barrier. For me personally, I find it really, really hard to talk about sexual health in Arabic. When I took the course with Dina, the girls, we found it really okay to study it in Hebrew, but when we talk about it in Arabic, it sounded so awkward and so weird and so out of place. So this course is not developed in our society, which is also a challenge for us women to educate ourselves about it. But it is changing. It is changing slowly but surely. There are great other organizations managing this change and leading it. The new generation is also more aware and has more desire to disconnect from their previous, from their society's expectations, and I have more hope for them and for the future generations. So about me, let's talk a little bit about me. So as you know, my name is Yasmin. I live in East Jerusalem in Astawiya. I majored in English literature and Asian studies. I'm a feminist. I joined Ladaat last year, took the course with Gina, who is such an amazing person, a supportive woman, and had the chance to meet other amazing women from East Jerusalem. I joined Ladaat since I felt the lack and the need for sexual health education. I have been looking for such organizations for decades. Back then, I wanted to also raise awareness about the subject to other women in my society. Personally, I have witnessed many extremely bad situations that happen to women that I personally know, and I feel the need to do something about it, no matter how small it is. I want women to have the option to own their bodies, to know that it's theirs, that it doesn't belong to their society. I want them to know their rights, their options, and for them to make their choices, their decisions, and for it not to be taken from them by spreading this cloud of ignorance on them and on their society. So that's it. Thank you very much for listening. I hope I didn't take too long.
You're perfect.
Thank you. Thank you. The stage is all yours, Dina.
Okay, so I'll continue, Marganit. Yeah. Okay, so it's a hard act to follow, but I'll try. After Yasmin, who is wonderful. So I'll give you a little bit of the background now about Ladaat. So my name is Dina. I'm the director of Ladaat, and my profession is I'm a social worker. That's what I was trained to do, and I've been working in Ladaat for almost 9 years now. I started as a volunteer in the helpline, then I managed the helpline for about 4 years, and since 2018 I've been the director. So to give you a little bit of a background of what we do as an organization and how we came to start this project, Ladaat is a very it's quite an old organization. We've been around for over 40 years. Founded in 76 as Shiloh, and we're one of the first organizations in Israel to promote reproductive rights. So I'll skip here so you can see this, but what we do is we have many different departments in Ladaat. This is something that's been growing a lot, especially in the last 10 years. Our basic is our counseling center, which is one-on-one counseling by volunteers that go through training in Hebrew and in Arabic since the last few months, in which we help women. Very similar. Americans usually understand when we say Planned Parenthood, so it's very similar to Planned Parenthood in the way that we help women with questions to do with contraception or pregnancy, worries, and morning after pill, and also we help women with abortion and deciding what they want to do. We believe in women's right for our own body. We're pro-choice, and that's how we help women through these difficult times. A lot of times it's more about crisis, but sometimes it's just learning and getting information. We have sexual education programs in which we do sex ed in schools in Jerusalem and the area. Just to give you the context, in Israel, sex education is not mandatory. Schools pay for it, or they have to really want to do it themselves. There aren't really any programs for it. So this is one of the services that we provide, mostly in West Jerusalem, but now already in East Jerusalem. I didn't think I would be saying this so quickly when we opened the program that we are already doing sex education in East Jerusalem. We thought it will take us at least 3 years to get there, but things are changing very fast. We also have a community outreach program working with various communities throughout, again, Jerusalem, mostly Jerusalem area, but also nationwide. And we also do things to do with activism and policy change. For instance, what Yasmin was talking about before, the fact we talk a bit more about the franchise system in East Jerusalem. We're one of the organizations, actually, I think Norbert, or it was on your Facebook, the article that was in Haaretz about it. They were one of the organizations working and promoting the change in East Jerusalem when it comes to health and their healthcare. But we're also very active now with changing the law about the abortion law in Israel and trying to be in the forefront of these very challenging issues a lot of the times. So it's always a question when we talk about working with the Palestinian community and us as a Jewish organization. So I always say we're not a Jewish organization or an Israeli organization per se. We're more of a human rights organization, but we are based, and our identity is mostly Jewish and Israeli. And then how do we approach working with the Palestinian community? Even though as we were based in Jerusalem and we are one of the only services that provide these kind of counseling and services, we have been always throughout the years working with Palestinian women. And we always had at least one staff member who speaks Arabic, but we then decided it's time to do something a bit more in depth with this community. So a little bit about the project of promoting sexual health in East Jerusalem. So I'll summarize a little bit. Yasmin talked about most of the points, and I'll just give a little overview of it. So Palestinian Jerusalem and East Jerusalem, women in East Jerusalem face unique challenges when it comes to their sexual and reproductive health. A lot of it is, in general, a lack of family planning services or STI testing. There aren't any at all. I have to say it's lacking in Israel in general. This is something we work on in Israel, in all the communities. And again, when you talk about marginalized communities, especially ones like the one in East Jerusalem, which is not only an Arab Palestinian community, it's also with all the difficulties that Yasmin was saying when it comes to their status, you can see the things, it's like with COVID as well. Things that are fundamentally wrong are even worse when it comes to marginalized communities. There is a very limited access to reproductive health. As Yasmin said, if you want to go to your health provider in your community, you can't. If you're single, you can't ask for contraception. They won't give it to you, which they won't give it to you is like, that's the light outcome. The worst can be they will call your father and tell you that you are an unmarried woman asking for contraception. And knowing this community, it's often can even be a risk on her life. Someone finding out that she is, for instance, sexually active and not married. And God forbid if it's someone who has an unwanted pregnancy and needs to get an abortion, it doesn't matter what the background for the pregnancy is. It's your fault if you got pregnant. And so the lack of confidentiality and the lack of also professional services, the doctors are not as professional. They don't have the training that Israeli doctors get in these facilities. And on the other hand, they can't travel to West Jerusalem a lot of times and get better healthcare, because if you are a member of Kupat Cholim, of an HMO, you can really go anywhere to any, if I want to make an appointment to a doctor and the one near me isn't available, I can take a different appointment anywhere else in the city. But women from East Jerusalem, they don't know, first of all, they don't know it's their right to do that. They're often denied getting there if they'll call their clinic, or if they won't know they have the option to go to East Jerusalem and get services. And also often they just don't have, it's not accessible to them. If it's because of language, that they don't, most of the East Jerusalem women don't speak Hebrew at all, or very little. And also the patriarchal society that Yasmin was talking about, you can't just travel by yourself. A lot of the women need some male to accompany them, which again, if you're trying to get confidential healthcare, it's not really an option for you. We talked about the taboo, the social stigma, the gender norms to do with gender in general, and especially when it comes to sex and sexuality, lack of confidentiality, I said, and there is no sexual education, so often a lack of basic knowledge about these things. So this is the need. This is something we've known of for a long time, and I have to say, the more we got into it, the more I understood for the first time really how dire the situation is. And when we started building the project, the first thing we said is, wait, we're not sure we're the ones who should be doing this. Let's see if we can partner with a local, from the community, a grassroots organization that we can train and help and guide through this. And as we were looking for organizations, we actually had two major issues. One, they're non-existent. There aren't many organizations that deal with these topics, and especially not when it comes to sex and sexuality. We did have, for instance, organizations that deal with violence against women or even sexual violence, but not reproductive rights. And the other thing is, some of the organizations that we could have worked with often won't cooperate with Israeli organizations. This is called anti-normalization. We completely respect that. But they find it hard to have any relations with any Israeli, if it's the government or other organizations, because that means that they accept the Israeli occupation, and they can't do that politically. So we did some meeting and mapping, and we recruited an advisory board, which is mostly Palestinian women from East Jerusalem, to help us think how to approach this issue. And we decided to open a department in Ladaat because we understood that we need this. There's a need. It's very strong and it's obvious to us, and apparently we'll be the ones to do it, at least to this part. So we started building a work plan, seeking funding, and as Yasmin said, I taught the first 2 classes in Hebrew. So we didn't have a worker that could, we didn't have the funding to hire anyone at that point. So we said, let's try. And it was about, I think, February last year or something, the beginning of the year, we sent out a Facebook advertisement seeking volunteers for this program with a course. They must be Hebrew speaking in a high enough level to study this in Hebrew, and let's put 50 shekels on it as a promotion. Let's see what happens. And we got over 40 women that applied for this program. Now this was midst COVID, so we did a small, there were 8 women in the first course, so we're always 10 in the room. Those were the restrictions at the time. And we started the first course training them. Towards the end of it was the whole May 2021 situation in East Jerusalem and in Gaza, and that was a big thing. And we had to postpone opening the line, and we launched the line mid-June. Started to get calls, and the women started coming, and I say manning the line, womaning the line, and then we already started also getting small funding for this. So by July, we already posted a second group. We did a more intense training in which we already recruited our department coordinator, Bayan, which who of you will be in the tour later this month will probably meet her. And she's wonderful. And she was already a participant in the second course, which still I was teaching in Hebrew. But then from now on, everything is happening in Arabic in this department, from their WhatsApp group. And we already had another training in Arabic since. And she's also grown from about 12 hours a week to 50% her position, and hopefully will grow more. So this is how we started building the project. And we were doing it very slowly, very thoughtfully, trying to be as much community oriented as possible. So what we do in this project, first of all, we do the Reproductive Health Counseling Center. We decided we're going to do what we know to do. This is what we know. We know reproductive rights. We know how to counsel women about these things. we know how to do sex education. We don't need to make it up. This is not a project that is targeted for East Jerusalem women as a project by itself. It's just expanding our work as an organization to the Arabic community. It's something that's always very important to me to convey. This is just us adapting our services to another community and focusing on it. So what we do is we have the Reproductive Counseling Center, which is operating now 5 days a week, actually 6, even 7 days a week. We started working like in the Hebrew 9, which we have certain hours a day, which women, they come in and they answer the phones. And we understood that, first of all, we don't have that. It will take time till we build enough of a database of women calling in that we should really be more available. And also a lot of the calls that come in are high crisis. I mean, this is women with unwanted pregnancies that are fearing for their lives. And like, we really need to be there. So it really operates like a hotline. So we have the volunteers who get the phone calls diverted to their phones during the day. And then from the afternoon and the weekends, it's Bayan that's on call. We started doing workshops for teens and young adults. This is something that we didn't think, as I said, that will happen this fast, but there was a very high demand from the field. We are expecting by the end of this school year to reach over 300 teens from East Jerusalem in various programs, and also start working with students in university. This is what Yasmin was saying. We want to start, a lot of them come and they really want to train other women. We like, suddenly they get this knowledge and it's amazing. It's mind blowing. And why didn't anyone tell us about it? And we have to spread the word. So we're trying to open, the volunteers themselves will be opening more like grassroots, small groups that they can share their knowledge with. Raising awareness through social media and online and offline community work. This is a very interesting thing because we opened like an Instagram account. I think it was September. We're going to get to 1,000 by the end of April. This is, mark my words, we're already past the 800. We're growing all the time. And we're diverting some of our attention and even our resources to this field because we suddenly understand that social media, and especially Instagram, because it's a very young, I'll show a little bit later, it's a very young platform. So the adults aren't there to monitor. And it's a great way for young women mostly to get information about their bodies. You're welcome to, whomever has Instagram, to follow us. It's a beautiful Instagram page. We also are starting to work with training service providers in East Jerusalem. This would be social workers, doctors, other members of the community that actually meet women and work with them. One, raise awareness that they can refer women to us, but also to give them tools to give a better first response to crises that have to do with reproductive health. Partnering with other organizations, doing some research and evaluation, thanks to Healing Across the Divide, that are making us in a good way do proper evaluation to the project. And also working in the advocacy and policy change, because we understand that it's the main focus still is the individual in most of our work, but we have to, I mean, we get all this knowledge, we meet all these people and have these experiences, and it's a great way for us to then affect upwards the policymakers and change the situation for these women and people in general. So this is a little bit a taste from our social media and online presence. So we have our website is translated to Arabic entirely. We have information about all the various contraception that are available in Israel and everything to do with pregnancy and abortion for women who need guidance through that. This is also a great way for them to connect to us, because they'll Google it and then they'll come. We're one of the leading results in Google when you ask these questions in Arabic, and then they can often reach us through the hotline in the website, and there's like a chat service. And our Instagram, which is also one of the platforms in which we get more questions through, also like they send us questions in the private messages, which we have, as you see, I think this is as of Thursday, 808 followers. There are more, but also thousands of engagements. Not all the people who are other than the followers, there are more people who are exposed to our content. And we can see that most of our followers are women, ages 18 to 25, most of them from East Jerusalem, but some of them from other places. We actually, because we are right now the only service in Arabic in Israel. Well, I have to say, we're kind of the only service in Arabic in the Middle East that helps women when it comes to reproductive questions to do with contraception and abortion. So we get questions and people coming. We have like some followers from Saudi Arabia. We had questions from Saudi Arabia coming in our email, and we also often get to help Palestinian women from Palestine even come into Israel to get abortions because it's illegal in Palestine, and we can help them kind of come in and connect them to doctors that we work with and assist them. And some pictures from what we've been doing. So we have the selfie is from our latest course that we're just, Thursday is our last training session with students who will be sex ed educators. And we have also from workshops that Bayan gave a group of at-risk teens from East Jerusalem. It was a 9-hour educational program that she gave, and currently are doing another school. And as I said, we will reach a few hundred teens by the end of the year. And a few quotes from, well, you heard Yasmin, so I don't know if we need the quotes, but things that the participants from the courses have said in their in the questionnaires that they filled afterwards. So one of them says, "I've never learned these things before. I'm starting to know my body and understand what is happening with it during the month and how it works. All this information is very new and exciting and gives me control over my own body." Some of the participants are all in their 20s, even late 20s, and this is the first time they've heard about it, and they really didn't know hardly anything. We often talked about their experiences as young girls, like getting their period and how traumatic it was for some of them. And another quote is, "The course helped me talk about sexuality with more women in my life and to feel that I'm not alone. I've never talked about this in Arabic." It's also what Yasmin said. "And there is something so powerful in it. It becomes something I can relate to as a Palestinian woman." I think we'll stop here because I'm sure you'll have some questions for either me or Yasmin. I think we covered most of it. So yeah, so we'll stay on schedule. So that's my part, and I think we can open for questions now.
I'm going to hand it over to Margaret, who's going to moderate the questions.
Yeah,
I'll stop the
Dina,
share.
can you, yeah, just so we can see everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, both Yasmin and Dina, for the presentation and all the information. I think I learned a lot of new things, although we're working for a while together. There are many questions, and I think what we will do is, oh wow. Maybe you can just decide who wants to address what. Okay, so the first question was about how does the helpline works?
So maybe I'll answer that. The helpline is, well, as I say, we operate every day in both languages, actually. And usually women will either call, they can reach us in various ways. They can text us, there's WhatsApp, there's a phone call, they can email us, and they can send us messages through our social media or through our website. And usually they'll contact, and whomever's on the phone will give them the first assistance, which could either be just answering a question. Usually it's more it's usually longer than that, especially when it comes to the Arabic line, because it's more of a crisis situation. And then we don't only give them the answer, we actually continue a relationship with them. So we'll call them up, we'll see how they're doing, we'll follow up. And often even, I think Yasmin got to do it not so long ago, actually physically go with women to the hospital and accompany them through procedures, and also to give them support, but also to be a bridge between them and the system that is often very difficult, also because of language, but also for other reasons. That answers the question.
Okay, I think they also ask about the resources that you have. So if you have anything in addition to the volunteers in the hotline.
For this program, it's all volunteers. We have one, there's me, and there's the director of the program, both in Hebrew and in Arabic, which are both part-time workers from social workers or students who social work, who are the ones who, this is also what I did in my previous role, like also manage the volunteers and train them and help them through when they have questions and give them like professional guidance, but also manage the calls coming in. So we have like a system in which we can decide what to do with each person who calls us and like following up and whatever. So they also like do the case management. That's the word I was looking for.
Okay, and other question is about, do you offer services to women who are lesbian or trans?
Yes, it's not our main population, mostly just because we deal so much with pregnancy and pregnancy related questions, but we do get, especially to do with STIs and general questions about sexuality. And we also partner with the open house, and which they specialize in LGBTQ plus communities, and we don't necessarily know everything, but we know how to connect people to where they need. Same, I have to say, to rape victims. So we often get, I mean, it's not the same, but as I'm saying, like different specialties that we have, we don't know how to necessarily treat them, but we do know how to help them with what they need from us, and then connect them to partnering organizations that can give them, we never say, I mean, this is something that's really important to us, we don't do everything. We have our specialty, and this is what we focus on, and we make sure we're the best at it, and know how to help people who come to us if they have other needs rather than what we do. Okay.
Is there a danger to the women who go to the reproductive health counseling center?
Yasmin, I think you should answer that one. Oh, I'll wait, I'll unmute you. Second, here.
Okay. Is there a danger? Well, it depends if you're single or married, or if you're married, if you have your husband's approval. If you're single, then you definitely should not be going to any local hospital or clinic. We usually send anyone who asks for help. We usually send them to hospitals in other cities. We have a few around the country who we refer them to, and as for married ones, same thing. Yes, there is a risk. We try to avoid it as much as possible.
Yeah, I have to say, as a director, I worry about Yasmin and her friends. I think sometimes even more. This is something that always, like, I lose sleep over it. Like, I'm always worried for Bayan and for those volunteers. We try and keep them as anonymous as possible, because they're also in risk as, you know, being part of this movement in a way. Again, the minor risk is reputation, but it can be worse. This is one of the questions we ask them when they come to volunteer. The first question is, do you have your family support? Do your family know that you're going to come and volunteer here? Because if you're hiding it from them, this is a problem, because we don't want you risking. We don't want to be a risk factor for you, because this is very radical work.
We have few moments to other questions. So one was about confidentiality, especially to minors, how you can protect that. If you have any database or anything that maybe can be in danger as well.
So everything to do with our database is completely secure. We have a special system which is like in a very high level of security. Up to like 2 years ago, we wouldn't had to document anything on computers. It was all on paper. But COVID was also another factor for us to move a bit faster forward. So it is online. So whenever everything comes to our information is completely confidential. And when it comes to minors in Israel, there is a law of confidentiality when it comes to them. For instance, a minor that's pregnant, it's completely confidential. Her parents shouldn't know anything about it, but we are aware of the faults in the system, and specifically of the risk factor of human error, or sometimes when it comes to East Jerusalem, not error, but deliberate harm. And so that's how we always try and keep them. We can't guarantee anything, but we try and do, as Yasmin said, maybe send them out of town, send them to a further clinic, build a whole cover story with the hospital for the reason they're in. We had a young woman a few years ago before the line. We had the Arabic line that I personally attended to, and she got pregnant. She was pregnant out of marriage, and a Palestinian young woman. And she didn't even know she was pregnant. She was already like 16 weeks pregnant. She got in a car accident and she had to get an x-ray, and they said, hey, why are you doing an x-ray? You're pregnant. You shouldn't have an x-ray. She had no idea that she was pregnant. She had no idea this is how you get pregnant. And she was like terrified for her life. And we just built this, because if her father would find out, she was scared he might kill her. And we built this whole story with the hospital that's a complication from the accident. And we admitted her in a different ward. She was like in the orthopedic ward while having an abortion. This is like, I think if we weren't there and involved, she wouldn't be able to navigate this story. There's many, I mean, I've got tons of stories like this, I'm afraid. Even things to do with payment. So a young woman we helped, and she paid for the abortion, and then she could get it back. I mean, you usually don't need, abortions are fully funded for most women in Israel. But she had to get the refund. And so they said to her, okay, fine, we'll refund, the account that pays your Kupat Cholim bill. And she said, no, that's my father. You can't send the money to him. And they said, that's okay. It won't come out. It won't say abortion. It will say pregnancy something. And we can't change it. It's too late now. So she was terrified, and she called us again. And we had to involve like the highest person in the Klali to do with payments, to stop the payment and move it to her bank account. But again, I mean, these are really things that without our intervention would probably never would really end badly. So this is like some of the, I'd say, dangers women face when it comes to these issues.
I will ask you just to, I know there are many other questions that we won't have the time to answer, but maybe just one question about any services that you have in the center for men, if at all, and maybe something about the ideology behind that.
So I think, but this is really a question for Yasmin, because I think in the Arabic line, we don't hardly get any men. We do have some services for men. Most men come for their partners. Usually they'll ask questions for their partners in their name. It is not something that is very developed in Israel for men to talk about sexuality, to talk about their needs when it comes to it, to talk about contraception, or even taking responsibility for contraception. So we don't get many men coming to us for services. This is one of the things we would like to maybe expand on in the future. This is for the counseling center. When we talk about sexual education, that is completely for all genders, not for all genders. And then that's where we meet the men and the young boys and have an opportunity to reach out. This will also be in the Arabic programs. We are also going to meet teenage boys, which is pretty cool.
Thank you so much, truly, for both of you. And maybe we would find a way to answer the other questions, because I think it's very important questions. And I do want to give, sorry?
Yeah, I want to say maybe Yasmin, if you want to say anything. Or
Yeah,
is that what you wanted to say?
Yeah. I just want to ask if you have some final notes that you want to share with us before Karen will have the closing talk.
I just want to say thank you for all of you for listening, for giving us your time, and for listening to our stories. And I truly appreciate it, and appreciate working with Dina as well. And hope to meet you in other meetings. And maybe sometimes in person.
Truly, thank you so very much. This is a perfect example of why health is politics. And And one can use health as a metaphor of engaging at a community level with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I'm sure everyone who's on this Zoom will agree that there is always has to be hope. That's just how I am. Dina talked about how we're working with Ladaat on issues of evaluation and so forth. So we have our role, but certainly I think everyone will agree that these could be and are some of tomorrow's leaders and are today already some of the leaders. But these are not the only initiatives that we support. We just approved several new grantees, including a nutrition intervention in a Palestinian refugee camp, a joint Arab Jewish intervention in northern Israel pertaining to prenatal care. There's in fact, just to go to the other end of the spectrum, a project that's just finishing right now, a joint Jewish Arab farm that's looking at improved nutrition and improved outcomes. So these are just some of the initiatives that we support. We generally have a fair number, and in fact, there are a few people who are not familiar to any of us who are either board members or myself. We usually have a few more, but unfortunately, Facebook would not allow us to advertise this meeting, which is the first time that's ever happened to us. We appealed, but of course not in time. So it's really remarkable to hear from Dina, Yasmin. I want to thank Marguerite, who's a wonderful and incredibly professional representative for Healing Across the Divides. I always like to stop on time, and we're at 12:58. I'm going to leave the last words to Karen Meadow, who's a board member for Healing Across the Divides, and then we'll wrap up. Karen, it's all yours.
Whoops, thank you. I'm absolutely flabbergasted. I had no idea of all these problems. I think about the somewhat ultra-religious communities in this country that give women all these problems. And I had no idea how really mind-bogglingly difficult it is for women in East Jerusalem, and I'm assuming in other Palestinian areas. The work you do is just amazing, and I'm very excited that I'm going to meet you because I'm coming on the study tour, which I'm very excited about too. And it will be so wonderful to be able to actually stand there and talk to you. And thank you so much for the work that you do. It's just mind-boggling, really wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks to all who joined. Appreciate it. And on our webpage at healingdivides.org, you can see lots more information. We'll be back in touch with many of you with future webinars, and all of you will be getting a copy of the recording later today or first thing in the morning. Thanks again for joining. It's 1 o'clock. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye all.